From the studios, let's talk about Louisiana. So, the great state of Louisiana had a Saturday primary. It was Saturday, May 16th. They do tend to have a lot of elections on Saturdays down in the Pelican State. And actually, some interesting results to go through. Before the election, I wasn't sure I was even going to do a video because it's like, who knew how interesting the results would really be, considering the fact that it's a pretty red state. But actually, there's a few things to talk about here. And one of them, the main thing that I think we need to talk about, is that the incumbent U.S. Senator Bill Cassidy, who was running for re-election, he has been defeated in the Republican primary. So now you may remember that Senator Cassidy, he voted to convict Donald Trump during his second impeachment following January 6th. In 2021, he took a lot of heat for it, tried to work his way back in with Donald Trump, but Trump endorsed Congresswoman Julia Letlow in the Republican primary to run against him. Well, Letlow has not sealed the deal yet. We'll explain in a minute. But what we do know for sure is that Cassidy will not be the Republican nominee. First U.S. Senator in quite a while, since a sitting senator has successfully been primaried, but it happened on Saturday in Louisiana. We also want to talk about the constitutional amendments, which all went down to defeat all 5 of them. So some very interesting results there. But let's talk about the Louisiana Senate race. So either Julia Letlow or John Fleming will be the Republican nominee, but it will not be the incumbent Senator Bill Cassidy. Letlow finished first with just under 45% of the vote. In Louisiana, you need 50% plus 1 to avoid a runoff. So she didn't do that. She was a clear first place finisher with Donald Trump's backing. Whereas the state treasurer, John Fleming, he's a former congressman, he got about 28%. The only question here was whether Fleming or Cassidy would come in second place. And you see Bill Cassidy there, just under 100,000 votes, less than 25% of the vote. Those are atrocious numbers for a sitting U.S. senator. So pretty clear that Republicans in Louisiana were going to heed Donald Trump's desires and get rid of Cassidy. That is exactly what's happened. About 75% of Republicans who voted in this primary wanted somebody else. Meanwhile, we'll talk briefly about the Democratic side here. There will also be a runoff on the Democratic side, so Jamie Davis and Gary Crockett will advance to a runoff, which is going to take place in June. So you see Nicholas Alvarez just barely missing out. It looks like only about 300 votes, less than 300 votes actually. So wouldn't be surprised if some late ballots are coming in. I'm not sure if there are any left over, but that is a very, very tight margin for second place for who's going to go to that runoff. But Jamie Davis definitely in that runoff. So Cassidy became the first U.S. Senator in 14 years. Since 2012, Dick Lugar in Indiana. He lost his primary. So Cassidy, the first one in 14 years to lose renomination. So a little bit of history here by Louisiana, and just a really terrible showing for the incumbent senator. Of course, he had the president out for him, and this is what happens in the Republican Party if you run afoul of Donald Trump. He's going to primary you, and this is what we've seen happen in a number of cases. We've seen it happen in Indiana. We see it happening right now to Thomas Massie in Kentucky. If you're a Republican and you cross Donald Trump, he's going to come after you. So Louisiana voters did what Donald Trump asked and got rid of him. So that was a very interesting result. Whomever emerges from that Republican runoff as the nominee, obviously going to be the favorite. But as we pivot now to talking about the constitutional amendments, and by the way, we were also supposed to be talking about some U.S. House primaries today. We are not, because as soon as that Supreme Court ruling came out a couple of weeks ago that essentially gutted the Voting Rights Act, the governor of Louisiana declared an emergency so that they could redistrict. And the emergency was getting rid of a Democratic seat. So there was no U.S. House primary. There should have been, but there wasn't, in case you were wondering where that was. But let's talk about the constitutional amendments now, because this is also interesting. You have a situation in Louisiana where actually there was a recall petition circulating right now for the governor. You had the Voting Rights Act ruling. You have a general discontent with the Republican Party, which is a nationwide thing. It is probably less pronounced in a place like Louisiana. However, Democrats and other left-leaning groups were telling their voters to get out for this primary and vote no on everything because the Republicans who run Louisiana put forth these amendments. So Democrats said, just stick it to Landry and all the Republicans and vote no on all of them. And that's exactly what happened. In fact, most of them were not even close to passing. The closest one was 58-42, and that's really not all that close either. All of them were landslide defeats. So we'll go through the results of each amendment and then just very briefly what it means. So amendment number 1, this was about civil service officers and reclassifying them, and this went down big. It wasn't just Democrats voting against that. It was just about everybody. When you got a margin like that. Amendment number 2, this was a local government one. This one was about the St. George community school system, and this one failed 64-36. So another pretty big loss, even though it did get significantly more votes than the first one. Amendment 3, this was the closest one. So this was the one about the teachers' retirement system and the $2,000 stipend that teachers get. This one failed too, 58-42. While now amendment number 4, this was the one, it was another local government one, allowing the parishes, which of course, if you're not familiar with Louisiana, parishes are counties, but they call them parishes. It allows parishes to exempt business inventory from the property taxes. This one failed 66-34. And then amendment number 5, which this one I think is actually pretty interesting and worth discussing some more. So this one was about judicial age limits. They were trying to increase the mandatory judicial retirement age from 70 to 75. And the voters said, absolutely not. 77-23, it failed. So you could take from that there might just be a lot of people who are dissatisfied with the older generation not getting out of the way and staying in office, whatever their office may be, until they're in their 70s or in their 80s. And that is a thing that's going on. I mean, the last president was in his 80s when he left office. The current president is about to turn 80. So there are definitely a lot of older politicians. And Louisiana said, hey, we want to keep our judges around for another 5 years till they're 75. And the voters said, absolutely not. So interesting result there. But just the fact that all 5 of them were defeated and it wasn't even close. I would say that this was a rare, at this point, a rare show of force for Democrats in Louisiana. Democrats did turn out, and clearly these amendments failed by such wide margins that you can't just say it was the fact that Democrats turned out. But every single one of these ideas turned out to be unpopular. You would have to imagine there was a significant amount of crossover to vote against these amendments that the governor, Jeff Landry, had wanted passed. So if you're a Trump-supporting Republican in Louisiana, you got some of what you wanted. You got Bill Cassidy out. You don't know who your nominee is going to be yet, but you got Cassidy out. Whereas on the other side, the constitutional amendments, you didn't get any of them passed, which I wouldn't say that it should necessarily be concerning for Republicans, but it's definitely a slap in the face that they probably figured that they were going to get at least some of them through. Maybe Amendment 3, which was the closest one, 58-42. They thought maybe they'd get some of them through, but no, they really weren't close to getting any of them through. So that is going to definitely hurt. And, we'll watch too and see if a recall petition goes forward. And even if it does, I wouldn't think that in a place like Louisiana, it'll succeed. But at the same time, there's clearly some level of discontent there. Clearly, some people got out to vote that otherwise wouldn't have, and the Democrats saw really good early voting numbers. So, well, at least for Louisiana anyway. So, it's worth keeping an eye on, as it is in a lot of places, because the Republicans are going to get rid of a Democratic seat in Louisiana. But I think that Democrats across the country are energized. So I think you could get some really wild results across the country over the course of the next 6 months or so. So some interesting stuff going on in Louisiana. There are going to be more primaries on Tuesday, the 19th. And you can stick around here at Election Yard for more on that. Like and subscribe. Follow us on social media. We'll see you soon.